Hey, what's up guys? Today we're going to talk about Raiden Shogun and answer the questions I've been commonly getting. In fact, many people want to know how good Raiden Shogun is and whether or not they should pull for her on her upcoming Rerun banner. In this video, I'm going to be doing just that, covering all of her strengths and weaknesses, first of all, talking about the situations where she shines and how to get the most value out of her, and then I'll move on to a more general overview of this character as a whole, how good she is and whether or not you should pull for her, answering the main question of the video regarding her power level and, as I said, how good she actually is. As always, I want you guys to know that I do stream most nights on Twitch, or as often as I can, so link in the description if you're interested. And with that being said, let's get right into it. Alright, so the first thing I want to do in this video is talk about Raiden's strengths as a character. As I'm sure you might know by now, Raiden Shogun is a character who can deal massive amounts of on-field damage through her elemental burst, which converts her normal attacks and charge attacks into electro damage. On top of that, while she is attacking, she also restores the energy of all your party members, which makes her a nice battery to slap in many teams where characters want that energy. Not only does she synergize very well with other electro characters that we'll talk about, but also some carries like Eula, who can use Raiden as an electro applier for super conduct, a good damage dealer during Eula's downtime, and also someone to give you some energy back. Raiden is also very powerful for similar reasons in a Xiangling team, in the sense that she can give a lot of energy to your whole team, your Xiangling, and even your Xingqiu, allowing him to run on much lower energy recharge than he would otherwise need. On top of that, the electro that Raiden applies allows your Xiangling to both proc vaporize and other reactions like overload, which allows for a very high DPS ceiling. Raiden's role can therefore be described as an on-field auto attacker through her burst, who can either be used as a DPS, a hyper carry in an electro team, or a more generalist support build, or sub DPS, burst DPS, whatever you want to call it, where Raiden will switch in, spend time on field during her burst, deal good damage and give energy to your whole team, and then swap out and let your other characters shine. On top of that, Raiden is someone who gives more energy to your team based on how much energy recharge she has, and also gains more damage, more electro damage from that, which makes her a very flexible character to build, as there are many different viable main stats for every piece. One of the things that I like the most about Raiden Shogun and why I advocate for her as a character is because of her flexibility. When she first came out, while we did discover some meta teams like Raiden with Xiangling and being paired in a Eula team, some of her potential was still untapped. Her strength as a hyper carry at C0, although C2 obviously makes it better, but even at C0 was something that was highly underrated. And now with the discovery of new teams for Raiden and just being a character who can give your team energy if you need it, makes her a very flexible option in certain teams as long as you can fit her in and spend some field time on her. She is a character who has an immense amount of potential overall, and with every new character that comes out, there's a decent chance that Raiden might synergize with them, as she fills a very unique and strong role. I do want to point out though that Raiden isn't for everyone. Not every team comp needs her. Many hyper carries who spend all the time on field won't really have time to swap into a Raiden, but there are many that can use her very efficiently, where she shines and defines the meta. Another thing that Raiden does quite nicely is through her elemental skill, she just buffs your team's burst damage by giving you this elemental burst damage bonus when you use it, while also just having a bit of passive damage as well. Another important thing that people don't consider too much is that Raiden Shogun makes your team generally a lot easier to play. By giving energy to your entire team, this makes your rotation a lot easier and a lot more flexible. If you don't have enough energy on your character, or if you're running a team that otherwise has a more precise rotation, thinking of something like a national team where you have to funnel particles to your Xiangling to allow her to get her Pyronado back on cooldown, running Raiden Shogun in that team will change it completely. By using Raiden as your on-field auto attacker, you will passively generate energy to your entire team, therefore making it a lot easier to play, as you no longer need to think about how to get your burst back because Raiden will do it for you. This might sound like an exaggeration, but a Raiden national team honestly just plays itself, especially when compared to its more complex counterparts. On top of just making your team a bit easier to play, being able to give your team energy recharge also just gives you more damage. The reason for this is because once you can meet the energy requirements for every character, you can start building them on more offensive stats like crit rate, crit damage, and attack percent. A good example of this is Xingqiu, who I typically run on a sacrificial sword to make sure he can use his burst on cooldown. That being said, when you pair him with Raiden Shogun in like a national team, you no longer need the sacrificial sword, as his energy recharge needed is greatly lowered to somewhere around 140 to 160, depending on many factors. Because of that, being able to run a more offensive weapon like a Blackcliff Longsword or even a Jade Cutter if you have it will allow you to have a much better ratio by building more crit rate, building more crit damage, and not needing as much energy recharge. Because of that, while having ER is convenient and is just nice to have, it also can increase your damage on many different characters. That is something that people oftentimes forget, as with every single character who wants to spam their burst on cooldown, what you're looking for primarily is enough energy recharge, and then when you have enough, you can start building more crit, more offensive stats. Lowering that threshold, lowering the amount of ER that you need, obviously allows you to start building more and more damage earlier on. To go into more nuance on some things that I talked about, let's talk about Raiden's teams. teams. I mentioned them briefly in the intro, but those first of all weren't all of them, and second of all, I want to go into a bit more detail. What's nice about running Raiden with someone like Eula, for example, is not only that you will, as I said, fill Eula's downtime and give her energy, but it also enables other characters who wouldn't otherwise be viable. A really good example of this is someone like Lisa. Lisa is a character who is widely regarded to be a bad character and many people don't use her. While she is very niche, one team where she actually can work very well is as a low investment support in a Eula Raiden team. The reason why she works in this team is because she can support your team from off field by buffing them with Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayers, the Noblesse Oblige, and also and especially her Ascension 4 passive. This passive decreases the defense of opponents by 15%, and defense reduction in Genshin Impact is very rare but very efficient. What Lisa does is through her burst, every time her burst will hit an enemy, it will reduce the defense of opponents by 15% for 10 seconds. Since her burst lasts a long time and this passive lasts for longer, like an extra 10 seconds after they get hit by the burst, this passive can buff not only your Eula's damage but also your Raiden's, therefore being a way to buff 2 DPSs at once. The problem with Lisa is that she herself doesn't do much damage and has trouble generating energy. That being said, as long as you just stack energy recharge on her artifacts, and even if your substats are absolutely terrible, Raiden Shogun is the character that enables Lisa to get her burst back on cooldown, making her efficient on very low investment. Because of that, this Eula Raiden Lisa team has been popping up recently, and it has been one of my personal favorite teams that has been enabled by Raiden. And while obviously Lisa is not a broken character or anything, I'm just using her as an example here to show that Raiden's energy generation to your entire team at once can enable certain characters that would otherwise be not as powerful. Other than just that though, like even in the more meta Eula teams where you pair her with Rosaria or Beto or anyone like that, Raiden can still be an amazing option and be one of the best supports for Eula. The same can be said about Xiangling. Xiangling Raiden teams, as I'm sure you know, are absolutely amazing. I have a ton of footage of it. I'm sure you've seen it throughout the video. It's just a very good team. There's even some more unorthodox ones like a Shao Raiden team, which I'm still doing testing on. I still don't have a full conclusion on how good or bad it is, but it is at the very least viable, and that kind of goes to show how flexible Raiden can be in teams that need energy. On top of that, as a hyper carry, Raiden Shogun shines exceptionally well. She can be paired with someone like Sara, especially if you have her 6th constellation, which increases the electro damage of your team or the crit damage of electro damage, as well as other electro supports and anemo characters like Kazuha or Jean to swirl everything together and increase your overall damage. On top of that, these electro teams are pretty straightforward to build and use, very flexible in their slots other than obviously Raiden. Lastly, another team I want to mention is a Jean sort of Sunfire team where you can use Jean and Bennett, swirl that pyro on your Jean, stack elemental mastery on her, and then also use Raiden in that rotation as your on-field carry. This is a really weird team that basically nobody uses, but honestly works very well and is very underrated. Another strength of Raiden, as I mentioned, is regarding her builds. First of all, for her weapons, while the Engulfing Lightning is definitely her best in slot, it is by no means needed. You can pull for it if you want it, but the Catch is an amazing free-to-play weapon that can be obtained and refined for free by any player just by fishing and buying it from the shop. While fishing is annoying, it's definitely worth it for Raiden, as the Catch is just an amazing option. This gives you 32% burst damage, energy recharge which is needed on this character, and will also increase the crit rate inside of your burst. Since Raiden's damage basically comes from her burst, this effect is insanely powerful on top of the energy recharge that you gain. Now that being said, she has many other options that work very well with her, a ton of good 5-star options, even other good 4-stars, but the fact that there's such a powerful free-to-play weapon and also a really good whale weapon with the Engulfing Lightning means that she is very easy to at least start building. On top of just her weapons though, artifact wise, she is also insanely flexible. While you do want the Emblem of Severed Fate, so that is one downside, it is a set that is basically a must on her because it gives you 20% energy recharge and then converts your ER, 25% of it, into elemental burst damage, which is absolutely huge. But there is a lot of flexibility regarding your stats. While you still want a crit rate or a crit damage circlet, your Goblet can be either electro or attack percent, and your Sands can be either attack percent or energy recharge, depending on what you need. While I will go into more detail in my updated Raiden guide, the general takeaway is that it highly depends on your substats, so you can use the pieces that you already farmed and already have, and also that it does depend on your weapon and team comp that you're running. This flexibility in your main stats may make it seem more complicated to build her, and it can be. Optimizing your Raiden isn't the easiest thing, but I would argue that what's nice about it is since there's so many viable options that are all very good, it allows you to pick what you already have based on your substats. Another good strength of Raiden is that she is perfectly viable and still very strong at C0. Everything I've said in this video so far was talking about a C0 Raiden, but she's also someone who has bonus potential that can get a lot better with certain key constellations, notably her second one. Her second constellation is a very early one, so it's not like the most expensive, and it also gives you just a stupid amount of damage. Raiden Shogun in her burst will ignore 60% of opponent's defense, which just makes her an amazing hyper carry at C2. That being said, it is by no means necessary, and I personally use Raiden hyper carry even at C0. All the footage you've seen so far in this video was a C0 Raiden, as it is very good. The one thing I want to say though, because I've mainly just talked positively about Raiden in this video so far, is talking about a few, I guess, downsides. One thing is that as a hyper carry and even as a burst support, you are someone who wants a lot of investment. Since you're going to spend a lot of time on field dealing damage and not just buffing your team, you really want her to have as much investment as possible, so she does scale off that. On top of that, many of her teams can be quite expensive, thinking of a Xiangling team, a Eula team, or even a Raiden hyper carry one, where you don't necessarily need the best Electro supports, but if you're running her with someone like Fischl or Kazuha, it does help if they have good investment. Another thing to point out is that for some reason her burst auto attacks don't work with Beidou. I've talked about this many times, and this is just very annoying. It's not the biggest deal, you can play around it, and we have since she came out, but it was just a letdown. A problem some people have with Raiden is regarding her flexibility, but I feel like the more time we spend testing her, the more teams are sort of discovered and tested, the more we realize that Raiden Shogun can fit quite a few different teams. She does need a lot of field time, that is something you need to know, so you can't slap her with hyper carries that have no downtime, but she fits her unique role quite well and can be paired with many different characters. I don't want to start repeating myself, so I'm going to leave it at that for that aspect. Now, to answer the central question of this video, how good is Raiden really? Well, the answer does vary on you, like how good of a pull she is varies on your account, what characters you have, and what teams you can put her in. I do want to say that overall she's a very powerful unit. While she is very hyped by everyone and she does get a lot of praise, I do believe it is not unjustified. While Raiden Shogun's potential is easier to reach than some other characters in the sense that yes, she is easier to play. It's easier to play a Raiden team and feel like you're doing very well because she just gives a ton of energy to your whole team and can just Unga Boonga and spam her normal and charge attacks inside of her burst and get a lot of value. That being said, despite her ease of access, she's still very good and has a place in many meta teams. While I don't want to repeat myself, I believe it's crucial to remind you that giving energy to your team not only makes it more flexible in your rotation, but also allows you to build more damage and less energy recharge. Raiden Shogun is also someone who can be played as a hyper carry. Mono Electro teams or Raiden with one Electro character and Bennett and Kazuha are actually quite powerful, and so this character can be played both as a main DPS and as a support. On top of that, a C2 Raiden is honestly comparable to like a C6 of a few other characters, just a very, very insane character at C2, but also perfectly good at C0. While she does have weaknesses like wanting investment and needing field time, I believe that she more than makes up for this, which is why I can safely say that she is a good character to pull for as long as you can use her in a team. I really like Raiden Shogun, and I've only liked her more and more the more I've played her. To avoid overhyping a character though, I do want to point out that not everyone needs her. Again, she's not a staple in every single team like someone like Kazuha or Bennett or some other characters of that sort, but if you have a team where Raiden can fit, I believe she's a great addition to your account and one who I personally do not regret pulling for. And so overall, those are my thoughts on Raiden Shogun, her strengths and weaknesses, and what I think about her as a character. I really hope I helped you guys decide whether or not you want to pull for her and give you guys a general idea of what to expect from this character. I do want to reiterate that I will be making an updated Raiden guide with her banner, covering everything you need to know about her and her builds, so stay tuned for that if you want to know more. Feel free to ask any questions you have in the comments as I do read most of them, and also if this video helped you out, likes are obviously appreciated. Feel free to sub if you want to catch new videos, and as always, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.